Hey everybody, this is Doa and this is How to Watch Starcraft 2. The idea behind this video is just to take a really basic look at a game of Starcraft 2, just to give people who maybe don't play the game an idea of how it's played, because I think Starcraft 2 can be an awesome spectator sport. I like to use the example of myself with American football. If I actually played the game, I would die, but I really like watching it because after you learn the basics of it, you can start to appreciate all the strategy and outwitting that the teams do to each other. And the same goes for StarCraft 2 also. You may not play it, and if you do play it, you may not play it at a professional level, but that doesn't mean you can't watch it and enjoy it and get excited about the matches, just because there is a lot of strategy and tactics and outwitting that goes on during a game. And the StarCraft 2, in case you didn't know, is a real-time strategy game. Strategic part of it comes in that both players start with the same, they start on the same level playing field, so the winner is really determined by whoever plays smarter. There's no sort of advantage that either player has just by what race they pick to play as. There's 3 races in StarCraft 2. This race that we're looking at right now is called the Protoss race. They're sort of a technologically advanced alien civilization, and the player that's playing them is named Entropy. Is a friend of mine here who was kind enough to let me cast one of his games for this. And in the southern part of the map we've got Cyanith, Terran player. This is the Terran race, and the Terran is essentially a futuristic version of humanity. Kind of think science fiction, and that's the type of thing that Terrans do. The first thing we're going to look at here is what's called a gathering. Now, out of these main buildings, one of the primary things they do is build what are called gatherers. For Terrans, those gatherers are called SCVs, and their job is just to harvest these minerals and to harvest the gas out of this Vespin geyser, because every unit in StarCraft 2 costs a certain amount of either minerals or gas, or a combination of the two. And so in order to be able to build units to attack and defeat your opponent with, you need to be able to gather those. So a good player will consistently be building gatherers all throughout the game, just so they can have more gatherers, meaning they can get more resources and more units. So that's what we're seeing initially here. Looks like we've also got Entropy building a Zealot out of one of his first buildings. There's always going to be a first offensive unit producing structure that a player is going to put down. In this case for Entropy, it's called a gateway. Building these early buildings can unlock more advanced buildings to use later in the game, so you can get more powerful units to defeat your opponent with. This Zealot is about to come out. He's just a very basic unit, just attacks ground targets. He's not ranged, he's a melee unit. Another thing I wanted to take a look at is the supply cost for each unit. This Zealot costs 2 supply, and when I mean supply, what I'm talking about is this number in the upper right hand corner of the screen. You can see right now it's at 26 supply, and that's basically the maximum size of an army that Entropy can have right now. Each one of these gatherers also costs 1 supply. Now, how you increase your supply so you can get a larger army is you build pylons if you're a Protoss player. These increase the total amount of supply you can have for your army, so you'll always want to keep building those so you can get a bigger and bigger army as the game goes on. And for Cyanith here, we've got supply depots, which increase the supply for the Terran race. And we see Cyanith building 3 of his first offensive building, that is, called a barracks. You can usually produce a couple different units out of each building. Looks like we see Entropy moving in with his Zealot, trying to get some information about what Cyanith is doing, but his Zealot is forced back pretty easily by this army that Cyanith has. It's an army of 3 right now, not a very big army, but Cyanith does have a Marine here, and then 2 of what are called Marauders. As you can imagine, the Terran race is based a lot about technology and ranged fire, so a lot of rockets and guns and things like that. And so he's going to be basing his early game strategy about creating units just from this barracks. Meanwhile, if we go over to Entropy's base, he's bringing in 2 more gateways himself, so he's going to be building a fair amount of those early game units as well. And he's also got another pylon coming in because he wants to keep increasing his supply. Now, the first interesting thing we see in this game really is that Entropy has chosen to build a second base pretty early on. Usually it's a little bit farther in the game before a player will take their second base. As we look around the map here, there's other places where players can build new and additional bases. They call those expos or expansion bases. And as the game goes on, the players will use up the resources in their early bases and have to build more bases in order to sustain production of offensive units and just to get an advantage economically over their opponent. As you can see, Entropy here has a little bit of an army coming up already. He's got some of these sentries, a couple zealots, and a stalker. So that's a good little army there for Entropy. He wants to protect himself from any sort of early aggression that his opponent might bring as he's trying to get his economy going here. 3 more Zealots coming in. We do see Sionith moving out across the map with a little bit of an army, so there is going to be an early attack from Sionith. Some Marines and some Marauders coming in, and we're going to have to see how that does against Entropy's forces. Looks like Entropy bringing in some more units here, and it looks like Sionith is going to be pretty much pushed back, just not big enough of an army to really do much damage. As you can see, Sionith doing a little bit of what's called micromanagement. That's micromanagement is when you talk about what the player is doing with their units in combat. So, for instance, if Sionith would have just let his guys sit there and shoot, as Entropy's units would have gotten closer to them, they would have done damage to them, and Sionith would lose even more units. So by moving back and shooting a little bit, he's doing damage to Entropy's units, while at the same time protecting his own. But as you can see here, the power is just overwhelming for Entropy, and even with these reinforcements, it doesn't look like Sionith is going to be able to do a significant amount of damage. As you can see, he's a little bit on the run there. He is going to probably try to pick off 1 or 2 more of these Zealots. Yep, he gets 1, and he's going to get 1 more probably. Yep, there he goes, and after that he's going to pull back to his base because he knows that attack has failed. And just because your attack fails doesn't necessarily mean you've lost the game, but things certainly aren't going too well for Sionith yet at this point. The one good thing about this is that attack did allow him to get up his first expansion, so Sionith is starting to move some gatherers in to start gathering resources from his second expansion. But if we go back to Entropy's base, it looks like he does have a little bit more of an advantage economically. He's been gathering from that second base longer. He's also destroying these rocks, and these rocks are kind of blocking him from getting into this area of the map where we can see there's more resources to be gained. So he's going to destroy these rocks here, and then he's going to go and build a third expansion rather early. So Entropy going for a very aggressive economic style of play. That's another difference you'll see in Starcraft 2. Some players will prefer to just get as much as they can off one base and make a big early aggressive attack and try to end the game right there. Well, as we see, Entropy is favoring more of a slower economic style of play, where he's going to build a lot of bases, build a huge army later on, and then move in and try to win the game. As you can see, his army is already pretty sizable. Now if we go back to Sionith's base, he's starting to gain another army too. He built 2 of these bunkers here, and the purpose of bunkers is you can jump your units inside of them if you're being attacked, and it provides a little bit of extra protection during that attack. So he may use those in the future, but right now they're empty. We'll see if he uses those later on. He may think about destroying these rocks too a little bit later on to get access to his third base. If we go back into Sionith's base a little bit farther, looks like he's got 2 more barracks coming up, so Sionith is still really favoring that barracks composition of units. Just going to be building units out of there pretty much, and as he gains more resources, he's going to be able to support himself out of more of these buildings. We also see a factory here, which is another higher tier tech structure, and he's not really making anything out of it. But if we go a little bit farther down here, we see a starport being built, and the starport you can only build after you've built a factory. So he wasn't really planning on using the factory, but he still needed to build one so he could get a starport. So we'll probably see that come into play a little bit later on too. As we can see here, the Terrans have an ability where they can lift up their buildings and move them around. So Sionith is going to move this building and land it right here to take advantage of one of these add-ons that Terrans can create for their buildings, and this sort of gives the building a special type of attribute. We're not going to really worry about that a whole lot right now, but just sort of an interesting thing that Terrans can do. If we go back to Entropy's base, we can see that he's got his third base up and running now. He's beginning to gather from it, and that army is starting to look pretty beefy from Entropy. In fact, he's starting to move a little bit farther across the map. He's going to inch his way forward a little bit more as he starts to feel more confident about his chances of winning a fight if he goes and attacks Sionith. We also see a scan coming down here. This is a comm scan. You see that rotating circle there, and that's something that Sionith can do from his command center. There's a little ability right here that says scanner sweep, and that basically lets him take a look at what's going on in his opponent's base. Looks like Entropy is ready to start moving out. He's got a Colossus now, which is a higher tier unit. He needed to make one of these robotics facilities and then a robotics bay to be able to make that Colossus, and as you can see, there's another one coming out right now, and that's probably going to give him the confidence he needs to move out across the map and attack Sionith. Looks like Sionith is moving out to take his third base, using that Terran ability to fly his building over rather than destroying those rocks, although he's probably going to want to do that pretty soon just so it's easier to move some of his gatherers over. Cyanoth is also using that starport that we took a look at earlier, this starport right here, to make some of what are called Vikings. Cyanoth, when he did that scan we saw a little bit ago, saw this Colossus. And what's really good against Colossus a lot of the times is Vikings, because they can attack really tall units. They're mostly made to shoot air, but Colossus are so large that they can hit them as well. Cyanoth's breaking those rocks to gain himself access to that other base. But we see Entropy moving in from the top here. Looks like Entropy is about to attack Cyanoth, and Cyanoth may be caught a little bit out of position. And yeah, it looks like only about half of Cyanoth's army attacking immediately. Entropy using an ability that the sentries have, these little guys here, to make force fields to push back Cyanoth's army, and it does not look very good for Cyanoth at all right now. That's one of the things with the game. Even though Cyanoth did have an army that was fairly comparable in size to Entropy's, maybe a little bit smaller, just the fact that he wasn't ready when the attack finally came and Entropy sort of surprised him with it, let Entropy do a lot of damage before Cyanoth could react. And that's pretty much going to be the end of the game right there. There's not a whole lot Cyanoth can do. As you can see, there's no real offensive units anywhere for him, and he did leave the game, so that basically, when a player leaves the game, it means that they've kind of ceded victory to their opponent and kind of admitted defeat. A lot of players will say GG before they leave, which is for good game. Cyanoth and Entropy are actually friends in real life, so there's not going to be any hard feelings there. You don't need to worry about bad manners or anything with him not saying GG before he leaves the game. They're still buds. So yeah, in the end it looks like Entropy's 3 bases gave him enough of an economic advantage to produce a big enough army to attack Cyanoth. That and being able to catch Cyanoth off guard is what won him the game. Just a really basic game of StarCraft 2 to kind of get an idea of it. I hope you really enjoyed it. StarCraft 2 is a great game to watch. I've been talking so long I can't speak anymore. It's a great game to watch and a great game to observe even if you don't play it. I'd encourage you to play it, but if you don't have the time, at least take a look at it. Go watch some professional replays now and see the awesome stuff that they do. It's really cool. So thanks again for watching. Enjoy those chocolates that your boyfriend slash husband slash whatever is about to give you. And thanks again for watching, and have a good one.